Okay, so now I open the session. It's probably going to take, we'll give a couple of minutes for some of our families to join us. I will buy time and talk a little bit until some folks join us. So, good morning from Rye, New York. Danny Sherrod here, founder and CEO of DC Finance's Family Office and High Net Worth Community. And I'm very excited to be here with Anousheh Ansari, who is in LA, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Right? And Meredith Walker, that's also with us. And you're in Texas.
Yes, Dallas.
Dallas, yeah, great. So I will tell you that we have a very interesting discussion today. As I said in my promos, with somebody who actually been to space. And people tell me there's an echo. I don't know. I will check that. I will check that with my team. I will just briefly say that Anousheh is an entrepreneur, businesswoman, space traveler, and CEO of X Prize Foundation. With us today is the global economist of X Prize, Meredith Walker. We'll talk to her later on today as well. A couple of words about Anousheh. Is a serial entrepreneur, co-founder and chairman of Prodea Systems, a company that will unleash the power of the internet to all consumers and dramatically alter and simplify consumers' digital living experience. Before that, as I've mentioned before, and that's how I got to know Anousheh and part of her family members, she co-founded, I think, one of the most impressive exits to come out of Texas, Dallas, Telecom Technologies, that later merged with Sonus. And of course, much more to it. While I had a dream of going diving in a beach somewhere, Anousheh's was to fly to space, which of course is only one of the things we'll be talking about because you touched so many angles. So first of all, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Great. So thank you so much for joining. And I would just want to make sure that our audio is fine. Now, what I would like obviously we have so many questions to ask you, different parts of your career. Maybe I'll start, I said that before, there's a TV commercial that I always like that shows a guy jumping from a cliff, and then another guy is doing skydiving and this and that, and then the camera goes backwards and you see it's actually a TV screen. And then it keeps on going backwards, and you see that the TV stands on this thing, and then there's a table and filled with pizza slices and beer cans and dirty socks and everything, and it keeps on going backwards. And then you see this fat guy sitting like this with the remote and just doing like that. And then it said, "Do less, live longer." And I think I don't know, I don't remember what it was for, but it was beer or pizza or whatever it is. And you went, and your dream was to go to space, which is crazy. But maybe you can tell us a little bit, about yourself. You came from the technology space, and if you could share a little bit of that with us.
Sure. So, Danny, I don't know what definition of life is, but I think it's important how you live your life. I always wanted to, I guess, jam-pack my life with a lot of interesting, exciting things, and space was a big part of it. But I was born in Iran, grew up in Iran until I was a teenager, and then I came to US to go to university. And when I came, because growing up, going to space was all I could think of, and I wanted to become an astronaut, I thought that I could probably go to, Starfleet Academy. I grew up watching Star Trek, and I thought that, there will be a program where people would apply and they can become part of a space program that would continue to grow, continue to become a program that will carry humans and let them explore, far, far away. But it looks like that the space program got stuck in the 1900s, in early years of the space program, when we were actually in a race to go to space, and not much had changed. And just being an immigrant, not even speaking English properly, and being a good girl who listens to her mom, my choices were being a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer, which were the careers of choice for me. And since I loved math and science, I became an engineer, and that's what shaped my career, and became an entrepreneur, met my husband, and started several successful technology companies, TTI being one of them. And throughout this whole journey, I learned a lot, and it had become actually a better path for me to get to my passion, which was going to space ultimately. But being an engineer, you're at heart a problem solver, and the problem solving part of my training, my career, my character has always been sort of at the core of everything I do, even here still at XPRIZE.
And maybe we can start. You guys had a company that was eventually a very major exit in Dallas, and you mentioned you started with your husband, but not only, right? I mean, some family members. I know Amir
Yes.
personally. So how did that come around? How did it become a family business?
Yes. So let me give you a little bit of family history. So Amir and I went to school together, my brother-in-law, and he's the one who introduced me to my husband. So he takes the credit, but I blame him always as well when things are going well. But basically, that's how we met. All three of us are engineers, electrical engineers, computer science majors. So after graduating, all three of us worked for MCI Telecommunications. So we had built our career in the telecom industry. And back then it was an industry that was growing and changing rapidly, because internet was sort of becoming something that went from just being in the background, used by universities and government, to opening up, becoming a way of commerce. And that was a pivotal moment, and a lot of innovation and excitement and entrepreneurship was built around how to use this new technology, internet, to do things differently. And our company and our big exit was around the same thing. I remember when I came to US, if I wanted to make an international call, even a long distance call, MCI, which no longer exists, was called a long distance company, because you paid like $1 or $1.50 for a long distance call, which is free right now. And international calls, don't even talk about it. It was very expensive. But because of internet and the technology we developed, which was the technology behind voice over IP, we went from paying a lot for something to literally nothing right now. And that's the path that a lot of exponential technologies are on, where you basically first digitize and then basically dematerialize the system, and then it becomes software. We went from big switches to software, so it was not as costly. So you dematerialize it, and then it demonetizes it, so the cost becomes low or nothing. And because the cost becomes very low, it's democratized and accessible by everyone. So that was the path that we were on with our technology and voice over IP at TTI. And that's how we met, and we worked together and built our company together. And the good thing is we had complementary skill sets, so we were able to work with each other, which I can't say that all families can do that, but fortunately our family was just the perfect combination of skill sets that worked well together.
That's interesting because again, working with your husband, working with your brother-in-law, you know, if there are disagreements about things, it's not, usually it's very sensitive. But you guys managed to do that for how many years?
Well, we had many companies, so we've been working together for close to 20 years. So
Wow. 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 And nobody said to one another, okay, that's it, I'm done. You managed to.
Except for, you know, when I sort of separated a little bit because I wanted to go to space and had to go for my training. The rest of the time we were all doing everything together. But during that time, I basically said, I have something I need to do. And they were very supportive. So it wasn't a business, but I had the complete support of the family behind me, and they cheered me on, and they were very happy that I was able to achieve what I always wanted to do.
And by the way, what I told you I would ask you, I mean, would be how many times have your parents told you, no, and that's the end of it, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. We're done. I need to go. When you told them, hey, mama, I'm going to space. Are you cool with that?
It's very difficult for any family member, parents especially, but you know, spouses, everyone. So I was very fortunate that I had everyone supporting me. I have been talking about going to space since I was probably 6, 7 years old, and I think people got tired of me talking about it. I mean, every screensaver, everything around me, every poster, every you know, everything around me just is about space, and I'm just completely fascinated by it. And so when the time came and this opportunity came for me, my mom knew that she can't tell me not to go. So she never did. She always was very supportive. But I have to tell you, the whole time from the day before launch until I returned, she was taking tranquilizers. She cried the whole time. So it was very, very difficult for her and the rest of the family. So that weighs heavily on me because I'm usually a really good daughter, and I don't do anything to hurt my mom. But this was the only time that I had to just do this for me and do it because I felt that my life would be incomplete without it. And she knew that, and she was very supportive.
And your husband and everyone was supporting you, and
Yes, yes, I was very happy to see that no one even once told me that maybe you shouldn't do this, and they knew the dangers. I knew the dangers, but they also knew that if I don't do it, I would live a life that will be incomplete, and I would have regrets. And you don't want to live a life with regrets. So that's I think why they were supporting me, and they just, you know, prayed a lot for my safe return, and they knew that even if something happens to me, that I would, you know, die a happy person. I would die doing something I love.
amazing, amazing. We will watch a short video before, and you know, we'll talk about all these exciting stories. I'm going to ruin my career and tell you this is as much space as I get to. You see this Star Wars here? You see, it's a, yeah. So I'm not supposed to show it to anybody, which I just did. But that's yeah. That's as far as I go. But now I will share with you a short video. And all those Star Wars you see, it's not me, it's my kids, it's not me. So there you go. Let's take a look.
This is the most important and crucial period of your lives. For what you do now and what you decide now at this age may well determine which way your life shall go.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction. How dare you?
This image has become all too familiar.
Thank you. Wow.
So that's it's a good introduction to what we do at X Prize, and maybe I'll tell you a story of how I got to be part of this amazing organization, and that's actually how I was able to achieve my dream of going to space. Even before I went to space, I became part of a legacy, which is the legacy of commercialization of space. Just last week, we witnessed the launch of the first commercial crew to the space station by SpaceX, and going back, if a couple of decades, you can trace that back to how the work started at X Prize. But the foundation, which is a foundation that was started by Peter Diamandis, was formed to basically, because he also shared my passion of wanting to go to space and had read the story of Charles Lindbergh, and that he flew from New York to Paris to win a prize, to win a competition called the Orteig Prize. And he thought to himself that, well, perhaps a competition will change the whole space program as well, because of Lindbergh's flight, the whole aviation industry got its beginnings and start. And we wanted to do the same thing for space. So he announced this $10 million prize, but when he thought that he can easily raise the money for it, he wasn't successful. He talked to large corporations, CEOs of these large corporations and individuals, and everyone told him it's too risky. And it was at the same time that we had sold our company, and he read one of my interviews where I talked about my passion for space, and he decided that he needs to talk to me because I will get it, because I want to go to space myself. And he tracked me down and found me and told me about this, idea of doing a competition. And Amir, Hamid, and I, my husband and I, were sitting around the table, and as he was describing this, we looked at each other, and as an entrepreneur, this made perfect sense to us. Because as entrepreneurs, especially in software, what you want to do is you want to build something. So you have an idea, you go hire a group of people, you tell them what you want. It will take, let's say, 3 years, 4 years, whatever number of years, and it costs this much. And usually it takes longer, it costs more, and you never know if you eventually get what you actually wanted. So this was, don't pay anything until you actually, get what you want. And so it made sense, and we were excited. And to me, it sounded like this will be the way for me that I would be able to go to space. So in 2000, We actually joined X Prize as the sponsors of the Ansari X Prize, and in 2004 the prize was won by Mojave Aerospace. We had about 26 teams that entered the competition, and from all over the world. And Bert Rutan, who's an incredible aerospace engineer, actually designed Spaceship One, the winning spaceship. And Richard Branson basically contracted with him at the time of the winning to commercialize it, which became Virgin Galactic, and now they have they went public last year, and they have now plans to fly commercial passengers hopefully soon. I think they would have flown this year if it wasn't for the pandemic, but it changed the entire shape of the industry, because that $10 million brought in about $100 million worth of investment. So there was a 10x investment in an area that no one was looking at. No one even imagined investing in space. And because of the competition, we were working with FAA, with NASA, sort of educating them on why there is a need for a commercial space program. And it took 10 years, but eventually we got the permits. A temporary group was formed at FAA to actually give launch permits. That group became the permanent group that now gives launch permits to SpaceX and other groups that fly, like Virgin or Blue Origin. And all those changes is what made possible for a multi-billion-dollar new space program to be created. And those are the type of changes, the way we use competition to really leverage investment and awareness and policy change to basically pull some, breakthrough, something that will make a big change, and pull it from the distant future and bring it forward and make it happen so we can all benefit from it. And we're trying to do that with environment, continue to work in exploration, but also in equity, especially whether it's access to food, water, healthcare, education. All these things are at the forefront of our work. And now with the pandemics, we have launched our Pandemic Alliance and working on solutions to make humanity resilient against pandemics and other threats.
And just before we'll go to the COVID-19 and of course the travel to space, which is of course what we want to talk about. And I didn't mention, by the way, you are the first woman to privately fund a trip to space, which is very interesting. But maybe Meredith, you can tell us a couple of words of what you do at X Prize. I know you from the days, you're involved in impact investing throughout your career, right? I saw you at the Institute later on with Mr. Crow and what he was doing, building one of the world's or the largest environmental happenings, conferences, and now with X Prize. Can you share a little bit from your end?
Thank you so much, Denny. Well, I think from hearing Anousheh and seeing that video, you can see why it would be so exciting for me to have this tremendous opportunity. As a young economist and business person, my goal was to solve things like global poverty and launch innovation to make the world better for all, through the career of international business consulting, and then also with the Federal Reserve looking at policy, in the nonprofit world through the East-West Institute, where we're working to basically prevent World War III, and then with Trammell Crow at EarthX, hosting the world's largest environmental forum. I've seen how public-private partnerships focused on innovation and healthy competition can bring about radical breakthroughs and change. But throughout all this time, I've been a tremendous admirer of X Prize. And when the opportunity came to serve with X Prize, under Anousheh's tremendous leadership, I jumped on it. And now as global economist, I'm looking at how that exploration, environment, and equity all work together in very unique ways to solve complex problems for our complex world. And more than that, I am also the head of prize advancement. So I am looking for those individuals, families, and corporations, like Anousheh's family was at the time for the Space Prize, who are wanting to leave a legacy and leave a mark on a finding a solution to very big problems.
Great. So before we jump into your story, we already have a couple of questions, maybe to keep the conversation interesting. So Kevin Wensing is asking, I believe you know Kevin as well, Meredith, is asking Anousheh, what do you think about Elon Musk and his partnership with NASA and SpaceX and America regaining manned launch capability?
So first of all, everyone at XPRIZE, including me, we watched the launch with a lot of excitement, and it was a historical moment. Elon basically started SpaceX about 18 years ago, and building a complete new launch system, which is reusable, which we didn't have before. And then on top of that, a manned space program. It's something that no one can achieve in the time frame and within the budget that was done. So really kudos to what SpaceX has done. And I am, and everyone is impressed with what happened. It did happen because it was a partnership. Meredith mentioned public-private partnership. In this case, actually, when we launched XPRIZE, part of the work we did is working with NASA and actually trying to show them why a partnership makes sense. Because when you bring the private sector, there's a lot of advantage in the type and efficiency of innovation in the private sector that can benefit the public sector. And there is a risk-taking that can happen that, for example, NASA cannot do inside NASA. And it started actually, we did the Centennial Challenges for NASA for the first time ever. They had never done competitions like this except for kids. So once we did a series of challenges for them, they saw the advantage, and that was the beginning. And then they started doing these contracts where first it was for the launch system. So they selected 4 companies, and that was the beginning and the seed funding for Elon's company and SpaceX. So I believe you need, in areas that are new marketplace like this, and something that is, it requires a lot of upfront investment, like a space travel. You need partnerships like this that enables it. But now that it's done, I think this is a very critical and pivotal point for commercial space, because the countries that were trying to see if this will ever happen and if it will be successful, and countries that don't have their own space program now have an opportunity to create a space program through commercial means or partnership with a commercial partner. And I think this will open up a whole lot of new opportunities in the space program. On top of that, we launched the Google Lunar XPRIZE, which was a prize we never awarded because no one won it. But last year, a team from Israel, Bereshit, landed on the surface. They landed, but not in one piece, but we still awarded them $1 million moonshot award. But that whole competition, even though the prize purse was not awarded, brought in $400 million worth of investment in what we call the lunar economy. The word lunar economy didn't exist. And now there's a commercial program for establishment on the moon. And those are things that I believe that we had a big hand in making it happen. And it really will change the landscape for technologies and investments in this area.
And again, before we'll start hearing how that about your story in space, another question: what is the future of commercial space, and how does Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin and Elon change the game? Does private partnership help USA over, say, strict government efforts like China? Very,
very interesting question, and specifically because you asked about China, it changes the game a little bit. in US, for example, before you had the commercial space program, the space programs themselves were dominated by who was in the White House and who was dominant forces in the Congress or in Senate. And these programs that are programs that take more than a 4-year cycle or even an 8-year cycle. So depending on how the budget was approved and if their budgets got cut or not, the programs kept, starting and stopping. And that's a very inefficient way of working on something complex and a space program. So when you have a private partner, it sort of helps, smooth out those ups and downs, and the private partner continues their work regardless of what's happening, because they have other reasons and other investments that will help them get through those peaks and valleys. So I think it's important. But when you have a government like China, where you don't have those types of changes happen that often, and they sort of are a government that control everything, then they can just decide and they will put whatever money they want into it, and they won't stop until they reach, they build their station, they go to space station they want to launch and go to the moon, they do it. So nothing can stop them. I believe in collaboration. I believe in international collaboration in space. And I think that is required in future, because it's not going to be very efficient. But in terms of our own potential opportunities, I think what you see with the work of Elon and Jeff and other companies that are sort of starting to get into the game, the cost of access to space will be reduced drastically. And it's already been reduced, and it will continue on that curve. When you reduce the cost of access to space, then there's a lot of opportunities that will open up, and a lot of those opportunities are sort of facing back on helping our own planet. There's lots of resources and energy in space that we can use and harness and help alleviate some of our needs here on Earth. We can do manufacturing in space. One of the things that I would love for Jeff Bezos to do, and I've been saying it to everyone, maybe I have to just leave XPRIZE and do it myself eventually, is that we have these data centers that are just basically large server farms that consume a tremendous amount of electricity to run and to cool down. And you can put them in orbit. It's very cold up there. You have lots of solar energy. We've done solar panels in space. We have satellites in space, so we can beam down data. So just building a lot of non-real-time needs storage. We need a place to store all of our videos of our cats and dogs someplace. So we can put it all in orbit. There's manufacturing opportunity in space. There's a 3D printer on space station right now that is being used to print organs. Some sophisticated, smaller size organs are harder to harness and print here because of our gravity well here, but in space, because you're in microgravity, you can do things easily. There's a lot of opportunity in orbit or on the moon too. So I think this is just the beginning, just like early days of internet. We couldn't even imagine how internet will be used. There will be so many new innovations in space that I'm very excited about.
And so just the timeline, you went to space, was that after TTI or during?
No, so we basically exited in 2000, and I stayed with Sonus for 2 years after that, and that's when we became sponsors of the XPRIZE. So I served on the board of XPRIZE since then, and just about 2 years ago joined as CEO. The prize was won in 2004. I went to space in 2006 with the Russian Soyuz program. So the trajectory of how I was able to actually get to space was part of my journey through XPRIZE, and got introduced and got to know the Russian space program and that whole opportunity through my involvement with Peter, who also was the co-founder of Space Adventures, the company that arranges these trips with Russian Space Agency. And it was at the anniversary of the first anniversary of the winning of the Ansari XPRIZE, where I met the CEO of Space Adventure, and he asked me if I was willing to go and just check out the program, and then the rest is history. Ended up in Russia for a whole year training, and then being asked to go to space after that.
Wow, Russia for a year. And how many months before you haven't slept? And so how was it? How was it? How was it the day, when it's happening and everything? And, share with us. You actually traveled to space. I mean, that's crazy.
It is. Sometimes I have to basically think about this, like, did I really go up there? It seems so far away now, but I have those vivid images of seeing our planet from space for the first time, and they're really, really still fresh in my memory. As I said, I ended up training for about a year in Russia, which was a whole experience by itself, because I was actually where the whole space program started. I was in the same corridors that Yuri Gagarin walked, and I talked to people who had met him and trained him, and it was really a very exciting and incredible experience. And to be honest with you, when I went there, actually, I was a backup. I wasn't even supposed to fly. I was there to check out the program, but just because I was around astronauts and I was a space geek, I wanted to be there. And it was only 3 weeks before the flight that something happened to the primary crew member, and I was on my way to the airport. My husband was coming to help me pack and get ready to go home, and that's when I got the call that do you want to go to space? And I thought it's a practical joke, and I'm like, this is not funny. I'm not in a mood. And they're like, no, really, do you want to go to space? And it was at that moment I on the spot I screamed, yes, of course. And by the time I got to the airport, my husband was coming from the security, and I told him, guess what? He's like, you're going to space? I'm like, yes, I'm going to space. and it was to me, it shows that when you want something really, really bad in your heart, somehow the universe conspires to help you get there. And for me, being there, spending a whole year training as if I was going to space, training very hard, gave me that opportunity, because when the examiners looked at my results and of my work, they said, well, she's trained, she's ready, she can go. And I got that chance, and I was able to go and on the Soyuz, it's like the Apollo rockets, Apollo capsule. There are 3 people, but it's smaller, so it was a very tiny space. Spent 2 days inside the capsule, and then after reaching the space station, I spent about 9 days on the space station, and it was the most incredible experience I had. The capsule was small, and I sort of didn't follow all the training that I had, where they ask you to not to move around a lot, and not to look out the window the first day, because it sort of stabilizes your vestibular system. And I was so excited, and I first thing that I did when I was able to open the belts, I floated up to the window, and of course I looked out the window and I saw planet Earth. And that was such an emotional and an amazing and beautiful moment of just seeing our planet and feeling that energy of life and that beauty in that background that is dark. It just makes you appreciate and see how incredible our home is. And at that moment, you identify with Earth as your home. That becomes your home. There is no other home, and it's and you become one with everyone. You become one Earth, and one species, one race, living all together. And that's, I think, it's a transformation that many astronauts go through, and that becomes sort of a driving force of what you do after that. And when you come back, that's how you look at the world. That's how you look at the work you need to do. And that's been my change when I came back.
How long does it take really until you get to the point where you can unbuckle and hang around, like the flight?
Yeah, it doesn't take much to get to orbit. You go pretty fast. It took maybe about, I think it takes about 12 to 15 minutes to get to orbit. But when you get to orbit, and it was similar to what you saw, perhaps if you watched SpaceX launch. Once you're in orbit, then they do a few burns to put you in the right orbit. So you slowly change orbit. So you become you get to the same orbit at the space station, and then you're chasing the space station until you can slowly dock with it. And back then they would do that over a period of 2 days, and thank God they don't do that over 2 days now. I think takes 18 hours, 19 hours, which is what took the Dragon capsule to get to the space station and dock. So it's much faster now. Yeah, back then it took 2 days, and I got very sick inside the capsule because, as I said, I didn't follow the rules. As soon as I opened my belt, I looked out the window. I was excited. I started going, flying up, flipping. I was weightless. I wanted to experience everything in the first minute, and then I got very sick, and I had to take a shot, and that made me drowsy. So the first 2 days, my body was adjusting, and your body goes through a lot of adjustment when you're in space. First, your vestibular system, then the fluid in your body shifts up. So you feel a lot of pressure on your sinuses, headache. Your face feels puffy, and then you slowly your vertebra stretches, so you become taller, but that puts strain on your back, so you get some back pain. So your body goes through a lot of changes in the first 24 to 48 hours. But then you adjust, and then by the time we got to the space station, I was fully adjusted, and then I spent 9 glorious days on the space station.
And does it cross your mind when you're stuck in a small vehicle out there that, what if, like in the movies, I get stuck here somehow, or, you don't have time to think about that?
Well, if you are claustrophobic, space travel is not for you. They test you, because that's a very important factor. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm claustrophobic, take me back." There is no going back. So one of the tests they do actually is have to don your space suit, sit in your seat, which is very cramped. So you sit sort of with your knees to your chest. And then they put you in a little, like a closet, which is a pressure chamber. They pressurize the suit, they pressurize the chamber, and you sit there for 2 hours. And they watch you, they monitor your heart rate and all your reactions to see if you start panicking or not. And that would be an indication that you are claustrophobic. You can go to space, but I'm not claustrophobic, so I was lucky, and I didn't feel bad at all.
Amazing, amazing. I think we can do an entire discussion just about space. It's just, I'm sure people are sitting like me just hearing you, and there's so many things to talk about. Maybe, we should do an entire session just about that. But we wanted to ask you other questions as well. Like, what are you doing these days, really? What are you doing in your career? Speaking about technology, what do you invest in these days? What sectors are you looking at? Which sectors do you think, or other than healthcare, obviously, are exciting these days? Would love to hear. I asked basically 12 questions now, but yeah.
Sure. So I am at XPRIZE now, and a lot of my focus and attention is at XPRIZE, looking at what are some of the major problems that we need to solve, and of course, environment is one of them. So we are working on launching a competition, which will be one of our largest, is around extracting carbon at a gigaton level from the atmosphere. I think these technologies will be evolving and taking off very rapidly. So we're very excited about that. There is also, we look at a lot of exponential technologies now. I mean, California these days a lot. I know wildfire has been an issue here. So there's a wildfire XPRIZE that we're working on, and that would probably look at maybe satellite imagery, AI and machine learning, and also maybe autonomous vehicles and drones to basically be able to detect wildfires before they become wildfires and be able to put them out. In general, when I look at technology, I think any technology around AI and machine learning will be incorporated in our everyday life, in our decision making. A lot of decision making will be going into this area, and at XPRIZE we're working on looking at making sure that the data sets used by these AI and machine learning systems are complete data sets that are not biased, that include gender. So we have a series of challenges around gender data gap, and right now we're looking at health, and especially mental health, which became an issue in the pandemic as well. But when I talk about the XPRIZes, you can also see the trend of the technologies. And because of the pandemic, I believe even some of these technologies and the adoption of these technologies have been accelerated. So in education and learning, for example, we did a global learning program, which was about using tablets to teach kids reading, writing, and basic arithmetic, and just to demonstrate if kids can learn by themselves. Now you see that because we had to all shelter in place, online learning has become something of great importance. So I think technologies in online learning will definitely change, and a lot of communication technologies like Zoom, you can see that will be enhanced, where it will start giving individuals a more personal sort of feeling of being there. We have a ANA Avatar XPRIZE, for example, which is about being able to use technologies like AR, VR, haptics, robotics, and being able to sort of be at a distance but feel like you're actually there, because you're sensing everything. You can sense everything. So I think a lot of the technologies for online interaction will evolve to make it more than just a visual and sound, and encompass more of the other senses in these types of interaction. And of course, you mentioned healthcare, the whole telemedicine and remote healthcare will be evolving tremendously. I think the whole supply chain technologies will change, and a lot of we talk at XPRIZE a lot about future of work, because automation will eliminate a lot of jobs, and I think that whole trend is accelerating as well. So we, on one hand, I think it is helpful, but on the other hand, I believe that a lot of the jobs that are lost will not come back. You will see that not only in the supply chain, but in restaurants, for example, there will be fully robotic restaurants and cooking and kitchens and everything that won't have a single person back there. In delivery, in drones, and all the autonomous driving machines that we've been talking about. I think all of these things that were already, being implemented and tested, I think all of those things will be accelerated. And because of what happened, I think the policymakers will be more open to work with the innovators to experiment. So the policy barriers will be lifted faster. So I think everything will happen a lot faster.
Do you think that COVID-19 will change? I mean, as somebody who's seen humanity from afar, would change how we work and communicate? I mean, I'm old school in the sense that, I don't think you can be efficient as you are in the office sometimes from home. You can ask my 5 kids about it. They come every 30 minutes to make sure that if you were thinking something, you forgot it now. And there's something about the human interaction that's different when you meet in the hall, when you meet here. Do you really think that now human beings will be A, more distant to one another, and B, will they say, you know what, who needs to go on a crowded subway and trains and concrete? Let's work in Connecticut on the beach and enjoy that. Do you really think that will substitute what we saw before? I mean, people will say, wait a minute, we don't really need an office. We don't really need to meet one another in the hall. Zoom is quite all right.
So there's 2 parts to this question. Definitely there is a behavior change that is happening where people are adapting to this type of doing work and communicating. Depending on individual situation, it may be efficient or it may not be. Depending on whether you have, a small apartment and you have 3 kids at home, well, of course, that will not be very efficient. And we have employees who are, saying that, sorry if I can't, do a Zoom, and because my kids are running around in the background. But there are ways to get around those things. There may be innovations that will come around building facilities that will allow you to work remotely and, I don't know, be a pod, for example. But definitely there is a fear factor that has sort of been embedded in our psyche now about being close to people and being in a crowded place. Not everyone, but when we've been taking surveys, and a large group of people feel scared to be in crowded places, being in a subway, being at an airport, being in a stadium. And I think it will take time for people to feel comfortable again. And we're looking at ways and solutions to make being back out there with a crowd safe and comfortable. So I believe the behavior of people will change. The way we do work will change. I think there will be a lot more acceptance for remote work. There are companies who are deciding that, well, this worked fine, so why not continue? Why not? I mean, maintaining and the cost of an office is a lot. So if you can eliminate that, there were virtual work before, but I think now large corporations have talked about perhaps just completely going virtual. It also depends on the nature of the work itself. So companies that are mostly software companies, it's easy for them to transition to that. But, personally, I believe, it's my personal belief, it has no scientific maybe reason behind it. I think there is something about human touch and human interaction I think we are social animals. And the reason humans have advanced and we became the dominant species on this planet is because we're social animals. And I believe that we need to continue find ways to be together. We create and co-create better when we're interacting. As much as this allows me to see and talk to someone, it's still limiting to me, at least. It's not a creative medium right now for me. I can't whiteboard anything here. There are tools for whiteboarding, but they are so archaic and crazy. I haven't seen any really good interactive systems. So maybe that's an area some of the entrepreneurs that out there can innovate. But I believe that eventually we'll have to find ways to be back together and work together. But you will see a lot going the other direction and remote work.
I think the minute humanity finds a way to freeze human beings under the age of 12, at a push of a button, what you're talking about will become a reality. We'll adopt just for a while, just for an hour, and say, hey, George, yeah, hold that thought, and then concentrate.
And the dogs too, Denny. We have to be able to freeze the dogs as well, right?
As I said, you may have a pod that, you go, it becomes an invisible pod. So it's like your cloaking device. So.
I can use it already
what
now.
You don't know, Denny, my teenager, my oldest child, while I was speaking, walks into my room, kind of distracting me, getting a car key so she could leave. So even when they get older, they can still interrupt.
I locked the door. I'm in the basement. The door is locked.
I didn't think I needed to lock the door with teenagers. But I did want to say that some of the things we are doing at XPRIZE, we're bringing all the space technologies that have been developed have applications in this COVID-19 area. So we've been talking with NASA, with ESA, and other space organizations about solving pandemic-related issues. We are also working at XPRIZE on certain challenges related to when we can all come back and be in public. Of course, we want to be able to go to stadiums again and feel that human energy, and certainly going back to school. And I would also like to mention, since Elon Musk was mentioned a few times, he did fund $10 million, the Global Learning X Prize. We had the Barbara Bush Adult Literacy X Prize, which was awarded after that, and are working on this Rapid Reskilling Prize as well during this time. The Environment Prizes, I think, have very unique partners. NRG and COSIA are funding the prize purse for a carbon prize that should be awarded hopefully either at the end of this year or beginning next year. And Shell funded the Ocean Discovery X Prize. So now the ocean floor will be entirely mapped. Anousheh, isn't this correct? Within the next 10 years, I believe, using that new technology.
Yeah, by 2030.
And I know you warned me that you need to leave after an hour. So maybe the last thing, I know you were working on or have already a book describing your amazing journey.
Yes, I actually wrote a book with the help of Homer Hickam, who has authored many successful books. And sort of everyone kept saying, you have to write your story down. So he helped me, and I wrote it down in a book called My Dream of Stars. And so I wrote it with the hopes that if a young girl from Iran can go to space, go from nothing to going to space. Anyone who has a dream, they can make their dream come true. So I use that to bring inspiration to especially young girls around the world and help them see that as long as they have hope and they have, they go after opportunities and they do the hard work, that there is always the chance that they can achieve their dreams.
And this is really what this is all about. All these series of discussions where I speak to exceptional family members, entrepreneurs from all around the world, different stages of life. Some are 77th generation from India, and another is an entrepreneur. We came up with this idea with a good friend of ours, Tal Carrot from the Silverstein family, who's behind the World Trade Center, to do an inspirational discussions with people that dealt with crisis or had a challenge and had a dream and never gave up. And I think this is exactly what we're seeing now with these crazy days we're experiencing. I think this is exactly what people need to hear, that, in every recession, in every crisis, there's an opportunity, and you just gotta, get out of your comfort zone and make things happen. I mean, you're obviously proved that. I mean, getting ready to this chat was the easiest one. Okay, space. She went to space. Okay, that's my question. How did you do that? So I would love to thank you again. I mean, your brother-in-law, Amir, was supposed to speak at our Dallas conference. It was postponed, and Meredith as well, of course. We are looking forward to have you on our stages once we're back and we know everything is fine. Thank you so much, Meredith, for making this happen. And Anousheh, if you have any last thing you want to add, please, but I know you have to go.
Thank you again for having me and introducing me to your community. And we definitely, would love to come back and hopefully in person be on stage and meet everyone and shake everyone's hand. And that would be a tremendous opportunity. Meanwhile, if any of the projects that we've been talking about, or if you have your own idea of what big problem in the world you want to solve, Meredith and I would love to talk to you and see if we can help and just reach out to us.
I think we would love to do another session. I mean, we haven't touched anything here. I mean, it's just, so much to talk about with you and Meredith. And I will just mention to everybody that next week I have 3 sessions a day after day, which is, I think, is the way of my PA to get back at me. 3 sessions day after day. On Tuesday, Cayman Islands. Tal Carrot from Silverstein and Silvertech talking about technology. The next day, Cayman Islands. And then Thursday, that starts on Tuesday. On Thursday, I'm speaking to the legend, David Sable, one of the biggest names in marketing and PR to ever walk the earth, speaking about space. So thank you so much. And everybody stay safe and hope to meet you all in person very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.